Hello, everyone. Welcome and good evening. My name is Hanedi Dola, and I am the Director for Community Partnerships at the Interfaith Center of New York. Tonight's program is in partnership with the New York Law School, and in particular, the Asylum Clinic. Uh, Also, we have the Sikh Coalition, the United Madrasi Association, the Sikh Cultural Society Gurdwara, United Arya Samaj Federation, and the Jamaica First Word Church of the Latter-day Saints, excuse me. Tonight's legal clinic is from a series of workshops at that the Interfaith Center of New York and the New York Law School have been working on together for the last year or so. We have partnered with several faith communities across New York City to provide their communities with firsthand education on Know Your Rights on housing, domestic violence, starting your own nonprofit, and tonight's clinic on immigration. During our presentation, you will hear from the Asylum Clinic students that are here tonight, and they will be covering topics on immigration, immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, and immigration services fraud. In beginning the presentation, I'm so sorry, I would like to introduce Professor Claire Thomas, as she's the director of the Asylum Clinic at New York Law School. She will guide us in the presentations and the format of which tonight will flow.
Great. Thank you so much, Hanedi, and thank you to the Interfaith Center for gathering us all here together. I know this has been a year in progress, but we finally figured out Zoom and how to make this all happen, so we're delighted to be here. So my 8 clinic students, who I'll let introduce themselves in just a minute, have prepared 2 presentations for you all. One is talking about knowing your rights when dealing with immigration enforcement, both at the border, in a person's home, on the streets, and if someone happens to be arrested, and also know your rights when working with immigration services providers. So lawyers or people who say they're lawyers but might not be lawyers, and how we can protect ourselves in the immigrant community to make sure that we're not victimized by scammers instead of people who are actually doing the job that they intend to do. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our first group. And so if that's going to be the students who are going to be talking about Know Your Rights when dealing with ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, at the border, in the home, on the streets, and if someone happens to be arrested. So I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Weber, who's going to share her screen and start our evening. And after this presentation, we will have questions before we start the next presentation. I'm happy also to monitor questions in the chat, so please feel free. Thank you. And Taylor, turning it over to you.
Hey, please just bear with me while I try to share my screen. Okay, and then can everybody see this properly? Great. So this is our Know Your Rights when dealing with ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and CBP, which stands for Customs and Border Protection. And we are New York Law School's Asylum Clinic. My name is Taylor Weber, and I will be presenting with Jaime, Lena, and Natalie. And Professor Thomas, I think this was your part.
That's fine. You can keep going, Taylor. That's
okay,
great.
Sure, yeah. No problem. So we are New York Law School, and this is the Know Your Rights workshop for immigrant communities when encountering immigration enforcement agencies when working with an immigration services provider. Hanedi Dole is the Director for Community Partnerships, Interfaith Center. So let's all thank her very much for being here and helping us put on this presentation. And then Professor Claire Thomas is the Director of our wonderful Asylum Clinic. So this event is brought to you by a collaboration of New York Law School and the Interfaith Center of New York. As members of New York Law School's Asylum Clinic, we have the unique and wonderful opportunity to represent real people and work on actual cases. Our work focuses on immigration, specifically on behalf of refugees fleeing their home countries and seeking safety here in the United States. We're very excited to meet with you all today to discuss the rights that immigrants have in our diverse communities. So as I said, I am Taylor Weber. I am a 2L, so I will be graduating in 2022. And then my wonderful teammates will be presenting themselves and introducing themselves as we go on. So for a quick overview, we're going to be going over what happens if ICE is at your home, if ICE is in your community, the differences between ICE and CBP, and what to do in the event that you are arrested. So first, if ICE is at your home. What our goal is for this presentation is that you will be prepared and have a game plan. We want to encourage you to be able to talk to your family and friends and get everyone on the same page. We're going to drop some really great links to some wonderful resources below, such as the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, the Immigrant Defense Project, informedimmigrant.com, and the National Immigrant Law Center. So the Constitution protects you too. The US Constitution does not just apply to US citizens. As non-citizens here on US soil, you are entitled to some of the protections that the Constitution affords. However, if you don't know your rights, ICE might try to use that against you. We want you to remember your rights to due process, legal counsel, and against unreasonable searches and seizures, so you can better protect yourselves and your families. So if ICE shows up at your door, the most important thing to do is try to remain calm. ICE is not going to be polite and show up at 9 a.m. They try to aim for times to get you roused and confused. Don't open the door, no matter what. The first thing you want to do is ask, what are you here for? Then you want to ask for identification. You don't need to open your door for this. If you have a peephole, you can ask the officer to show their badge or another form of identification through that. Or you could ask for them to put it through the window or something like that, or slide it under the door. Then you want to ask for a warrant, and I will get into this a little bit further. Is it a warrant that says it's for deportation or removal? Do not open the door. They do not have the right to enter your home without your consent. Is it a warrant for a judicial search or an arrest? The first thing you're going to want to do is check. You can do this similar to how you would ask to check for a badge, where you could ask them to put it to the window or slide it under the door. If this warrant is not signed by a judge, if it has the wrong address, or if it does not have the name of someone who resides at that residence, do not let them in. And you need to tell them, I do not consent. You may not enter my home. That is it. If you're going to say anything, make sure you are asserting your rights and not allowing them in. It's also important to document these interactions as best as you can. If you have your cell phone, you can record or take photos. You want to make sure that you capture what is happening in the event that you may need it in the future. So on the left side of the screen, we have an example of what is not a judicially issued warrant. This is a warrant of removal/deportation. Note that it is not invalid because it isn't filled out. That just happens to be the template that we have here. It isn't valid because it's not a judicially issued warrant. So you don't have to pay this any mind. You tell them to come back with a judicial warrant or just to leave you alone and call your lawyer. On the right, that is a judicially issued warrant. Unfortunately, if ICE just show up with this, you have to let them in. Still call your lawyer, still assert your rights. You do not have to speak with them unless you have legal counsel. So to recap, do not sign anything. Do not lie. Don't tell them that you are a US citizen if you're not. Don't feed them any information because unfortunately they can and they will use that against you. Also, don't consent to a search. I understand that some people might think it might be easier, but you know your rights and hopefully now you know them a little better. Don't allow them in. What you should do is document it as best as you can. And then you can also report. So we have this number right up here. This is for the Immigrant Defense Project, and you can report ICE sightings or ICE interactions in your community. It's also important to make a safety plan. We understand that we could never understand the horror that you might feel if ICE shows up at your home. But having a safety plan in place is going to make it easier for you and your family to feel safer if you do have these interactions. There are a lot of flyers available on websites such as the ACLU, where you can print them out and put them up at your door so that if you do have these interactions, you'll remember what to say in the future so that you don't feel caught off guard. The most important thing is that you and your family remain safe.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Jaime Valbuena Hernandez, and I too am a 2L, so I will be graduating from law school next year. And I will be talking about first your rights when ICE is in your community. Next slide, please. As Taylor said, ICE will approach you at random times in the day. So it could be in the streets while you're at work, in the park, or sometimes in court. However, as of December 2020, ICE is no longer allowed to arrest you inside or outside of New York courts. Thank you to Cuomo signing the act that stopped such thing. But most of the times, ICE is not going to be in uniform. If you see around, sorry about the noise, NYPD will be in their uniform, while ICE will be in casual clothing. But you have rights when stopped by ICE. If you ever stop by ICE, number one, ask them to identify themselves. Ask them for a badge. Ask them for some sort of identification. Number two, then ask if you're free to go. And this is where sort of we break it down into two parts. If yes, walk away and do not answer any questions. If they tell you that you're not free to go, do not resist or run away. Plainly just do not say anything. Tell the officers you will remain silent and you want to speak to a lawyer. Even if you don't have a lawyer, just tell them you want to speak to your lawyer and remain silent. And as Taylor said, in addition, do not consent to a search in your bag or pants. They are going to try to search you for identification that proves that you are not a US citizen, and that's going to help them. Just don't consent to a search. Have a plan. Make sure you're prepared for any type of encounters with ICE and a plan of who to call. Make sure you remain silent. 1, 2, ask to speak to a lawyer again, and you do not consent to any searches. If someone is arrested by ICE, you should be able to locate them at the provided link, which one of my group members will drop in a couple of seconds. But note that it can take at least 24 hours for the information to be uploaded. Sometimes it could take more than 24 hours, but just keep that in the back of your head when doing that. Next. Besides from ICE being in a community, now we're moving to rights when filming ICE, if you decide to film ICE. It's super important to note that you can report all the incidents when you see ICE, but you don't necessarily have to film or record ICE. You could also write what you saw and report that to whoever you are going to send the information to. You have a right to film the interaction as long as you're not interfering with the arrests that ICE is trying to make. And your safety is super important, so do not feel obligated to record ICE. You are more than welcome to jot down whatever you're seeing, and you can even type it on your phone and move forward with that. Just make sure if you are filming, you comply with whatever ICE is saying. Next slide, please. If you are, like I said, if you're documenting, just make sure that you comply with what they say. So if they ask you to move back or move to the sides, just make sure you record yourself doing that so that in the future, ICE can't say they were prevented from arresting an individual because of the area around. And once again, if you're filming and writing, try to jot down some important details like ISIS badges, ISIS badge number, if there were any weapons, how they were dressed, and sort of most importantly, the intersections of the street where they located on X and X Street in specific apartment buildings in specific neighborhoods. As much information as you can give to if and when the news spreads to alert people where the ICE was at. If it does happen, ICE agents may become violent. Just stay calm and remember that your safety is one of the most important things here. But a very important thing is when recording, jotting down things, do not reveal the identity of the person being arrested, the person immigration status, or their criminal history. This information could be negatively used against the person, and we don't want that to happen. Uh, Once again, ICE, as said, can get violent, so they may try to take your phone away and stop you from recording. Simply, if they do that, lock your phone and put it away. Whatever piece of evidence you filmed, that it would stop, and you can continue jotting down if you choose to. If you did film, you should make a copy of the video. Do not edit or make changes to the original video. Rather, edit a copy of the video. And please, if you did film, send it to the person's lawyer, to the person's family. They should be better equipped on how to handle the distribution of a video. It could be very sensitive, and some people don't want that information shown to the public, and that's totally fine. But if they choose to leak or distribute the video, it should be under their terms, and it can help an individual be released from the detention center if they are in the detention center.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Young. I am a 3L at New York Law School, so I'm almost done. I'll graduate in May. Yay. Thank you all for coming tonight. And so my focus on this presentation is to, talk about ICE versus CBP and what the difference is. So we've talked a little bit about ICE so far. ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and CBP is Customs and Border Protection. So they're both under the Department of Homeland Security. They're like the little like children, I guess you could say, of the big agency. They're two little different areas. So ICE, as we've talked about, enforces customs and immigration laws at the border and in the inside of the United States. And CBP enforces customs and immigration law at the border and near the border, as well as other laws relating to the border. So things like the introduction of like harmful plant or animal species and public health requirements. They have a pretty broad like area of things that they regulate. And so when I was researching this, I'm like, okay, it's important to know what is a border versus what is a port of entry. Because sometimes you think of those things and it's like, what are they? Is there a difference, So a border is any geographic boundary between the US and other countries. And so the US border is made up of several areas where people can move by foot, vehicle, boat, from one country to another through areas called ports of entry. So both of these photos here are just ones that I found that I thought were kind of cool that demonstrated like the actual border. So the photo on top is residents of Arizona NACO Arizona playing volleyball with residents of NACO Mexico for a volleyball match. And then the photo below is a photo of the USA and Canada line, which is in Vermont. And then I just wrote a little side comment that actually the US-Canada border has been closed for tourism for over a year due to COVID-19. So that's a border. So what is a port of entry? A port of entry is the government facility at the international border where people, vehicles, goods can enter or leave the country. So airports, seaports, and there's also like land ports, I guess you could say. So land ports are, they include inspection sites on international roads, freeways, and bridges. But I think probably one of the most common ones that people, are aware of and it travel every day. I mean, with COVID, it's a little bit different, but our airports. So I thought that was, something we'll touch on a little bit later in our slide. Okay. So when you're entering and exiting the US, it's important to know your rights in the border zone and when you're in the airport and then at border checkpoints, which those are things that we'll talk about in a bit. So as I discussed, the CBP is responsible for protecting the country's borders and laws dealing with the entry and exit of citizens and non-citizens. And it's important to remember that the CBP officers can, without a warrant, or they don't even need, reasonable suspicion or anything to search you. And it's any person is subject to inspection. But one interesting thing that I didn't know necessarily is that CBP can board vehicles, vessels, and search for people without immigration documentation within a reasonable distance. And so I was like, okay, what is a reasonable distance? That is 100 miles from any external boundary of the United States. And according to the ACLU, 2 out of 3 people live within the 100-mile zone. And those states that I have listed there are states that are completely in this zone, which I found interesting. So this is the diagram, but basically you do not have the same legal rights like at the border and at ports of entries as you would elsewhere in the United States. So it's really important to remember that your rights are limited there. This just shows how crazy the 100 miles is. It's like much more than you think. And that is in total, 197.4 million people in total. Okay, so at airports. So it doesn't matter if you're an American citizen or you have a green card or a visa, CBP officers can stop any person to get more information about your immigration status, to decide whether they should let you into the country. They can also ask you what you're bringing into the country. And as I kind of briefly stated, warrant, suspicion of wrongdoing, or consent to search your items is not needed at the border and ports of entries. And it's really important to remember, officers cannot select you for questioning based on your religion, race, national origin, gender, ethnicity, or political beliefs. And at the sticky note right there is a resource from the ACLU that covers more rights at the airports that have more specific questions. And it's really helpful, and we'll put that in the chat. Okay, so knowing your rights at border checkpoints. So the photo I have here is a border checkpoint, and actually that was in New York. And so when you're stopped at a border checkpoint, the agents are allowed to ask you a few limited questions to verify the citizenship status of the people in the car, and they can request document proof of immigration status. And then they can make a quick observation of what's in plain view inside of the vehicle. So I also put on there that some agents will ask some cars to go through a secondary inspection. And so basically if that were to happen to you, they shouldn't hold you there for very long. And it's actually supposed to be just limited and routine questions, again, about your immigration status. And they're not supposed to, like I said, do any, just in plain view of what's in your car, and that's it. And then also I wrote in the star with the stars next to it, never flee a checkpoint, because if you flee from it, it is a felony. So don't flee from an immigration checkpoint. And this is a lot of text on that, on this, but it's a really, really helpful source that we actually put on the handout that you guys will receive, about just different times where you may encounter CBP officers. And this kind of touches more in depth about other scenarios. So we talked about at checkpoints and border crossings today. This also notes about in the car, on your private property, or in jail or detention. And like I said, this resource will be provided for you. And this is another resource. It's the same PDF. It's really, really helpful. I think almost all of us used ACLU resources for this presentation because they're just an awesome organization. And a lot of those sources that we provided come in a number of languages too. So that's really helpful. And this is just another diagram, I guess you could say, of short things to remember in regards to custom and border protection if you encounter them and what to do and all that. So thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi guys, my name is Lena Abdullah. I'm a second-year law school student at New York Law School. And I just want to thank you guys again. I know you've already been thanked 3 times, but a 4th time for joining us for our presentation tonight. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what your rights are and what to expect if you encounter law enforcement or immigration enforcement officials. What to do if you are arrested. Oh, can you go back 1 second? Sorry. What to do if you're arrested by your local police. So this is referring to a criminal arrest, not about an immigration violation.
So if you're here in New York, I understand anyone can be anywhere in these COVID times, but this would be talking about like the NYPD. Okay. So your number one rule, number one right, you've probably seen it in all of your movies and anything you've ever, crime show you've ever seen, but you do have the right to remain silent. You do not have to volunteer any answers. By that, I mean, sometimes you can volunteer answers when the police ask you to do something that seems pretty innocent, or routine, like asking you for your ID or asking you where you were born. You don't have to answer these questions and you don't have to hand them any of your identification. You do have the right to remain silent. You don't have to sign anything they ask you to sign. If they ask you to sign any sorts of documents or like statements, you don't have to sign them. And specifically, if you can't read English or English is not your first language, you can request a translator just to help you understand what it is they're asking you to sign. But even then, you don't have to sign it. And you should not be lying to them at all. Something that's important to note, although you do have the right to remain silent, it's confusing because you can't just sit there in silence and assert that right. You have to actually tell the officer that you are asserting your right to remain silent. You also do have the right to an attorney. If you've been arrested for any sort of criminal reason, so if the police suspect you of doing something that is against the law, you can ask them for an attorney. And all you have to do is say, I would like to speak to a lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, the state must provide with one for free. That's part of your rights to an attorney. And also at this point in the interrogation, the police can no longer continue asking you questions unless you've had the chance to speak to an attorney who will be present during your questioning. So again, remember, I would like to assert my right to remain silent and I would like to speak to a lawyer. So if you're picked up by ICE, and ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So this isn't when you're picked up by the police because you allegedly did something against the law, but when you're picked up by an immigration officer because they suspect that you are living in the United States illegally. Again, you do not have to sign anything. You do not have to sign any statements or documents, especially, again, if you cannot read anything that they ask you to sign, you have the right to ask for a translator so that at least you can understand what it is that they are asking you to sign. And even then, you still don't have to sign it. If they pressure you, just tell them, I would like to speak to a lawyer first. Even if you don't have a lawyer, it would be helpful to tell them that then. You have the right to remain silent. And again, do not volunteer any information to them about your immigration status. And again, here we're talking about presenting forms of identification. So if the only ID that you have with you is from another country or indicates that you're not a citizen, so pretty much any identification that isn't a United States passport, don't show it to them. This will help them make their case against you. And keep in mind that anything you say to them will most likely be used against you in the future. Do not lie. You have the right to remain silent, but you do not at all have the right to lie. And it's important to keep in mind that lying to an immigration officer about your immigration status does carry serious penalties. So assert your right to remain silent, but do not lie. Also, again, don't show fake documentation. That's pretty much goes hand in hand with lying. If you don't have lawful status in the United States, you should not show any form of documentation or identification from your country of nationality because that indicates that you're not a citizen. What is going to happen if you are picked up by ICE, and kind of just preparing you for a worst case scenario of what to expect if this were to happen. If ICE is holding you, they are going to fingerprint you and interview you. You have to allow them to fingerprint you, but in your interview, you do have the right to remain silent. However, don't forget to tell them that you are asserting your right to remain silent. When not to remain silent. There are times, even after you have asserted your right to remain silent, that you should break your silence. One of those times, and probably the most key time, is if you are afraid that something bad will happen to you if you're sent back to your home country. If you fear persecution or harm or anything bad happening to you, if you are returned back to your country of nationality, tell the officer and tell them immediately. The sooner you tell the officer, the better, especially if you've had contact with immigration enforcement in the past. A notice to appear. So sometimes you'll receive one of these, which is essentially a charging document that signals that removal proceedings have now begun against you, and it lists the reasons why you would be removable or deportable from the United States, and it also lists your rights during removal proceedings. These are the right to obtain counsel, the responsibility to let the government know if you change your address, and the consequences of failing to appear for your scheduled hearing. If you are afraid of being sent back to your home country, tell the officer when they give you this notice, and if they ask you why, tell them why. Also, this is an important piece of paper to hold on to make sure it gives all of these pieces of information so that you can provide your attorney with it to get the best representation possible. You also have the right to make a phone call. If you are detained, you will have the right to make a phone call. Something that's really important to keep in mind, though, is that you're not going to have your cell phone and your contacts written in front of you to peruse through to figure out who to call. You are going to need to memorize the phone number of someone that can help you. That can be a family member, that can be an attorney. It can be anyone, but it needs to be someone that can help you, and you have to memorize the number and contact them as soon as you can. A question that I frequently have gotten is like the question of your right to an attorney in immigration proceedings. And so there is a distinction between a criminal proceeding and an immigration proceeding. In a criminal proceeding, so if you were picked up by the police, not ICE, for allegedly breaking the law, you have the right to a free attorney. If you are picked up by ICE, immigration enforcement, for allegedly living in the United States illegally, you do not have the right to a free attorney, but you do have the right to obtain a lawyer at no cost to the government, meaning that you can obtain a lawyer that you pay for. You can also obtain a lawyer through a nonprofit organization that's tailored to representing people in immigration proceedings free of charge. And also, you do have the right to represent yourself. Thank you guys for coming. I hope that we didn't overload you guys with all of this information. If you have any questions for us, now is the perfect time to ask. You can, I believe, raise your hand, and if not, put the question in the chat and we're happy to answer it.
Great. Thank you all so much for that excellent presentation. Participants, any questions on knowing your rights with ICE?
I have a question. I'm going to ask. I believe it was Taylor, in your presentation, you talked about a warrant. I wanted to know, if I was a person that was being raided by ICE, how would I know that it's a judicially issued warrant? How can I tell the difference, and how do I know if it's the right document?
That's a really good question. Professor Thomas, would you like me to answer, or would you rather answer?
Why don't you start and I'll jump in if there's anything to just add to it. How about that?
Great. So now, hopefully that you have all seen the difference, you would be able to know. Unfortunately, somebody who hasn't been to one of these presentations or sought out this resource might not know. You should ask. Certainly, I can't speak to whether or not ICE is going to be very forthcoming or truthful about that information, but you should certainly ask and try to familiarize yourself with the difference. The main thing is on the warrant for removal or deportation, it will say that. And if you just look for those words, that should be a cue to you to not open the door. And if it is the other warrant that says judicially signed and it's signed by a judge, then you would have to comply with that.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. I think the key difference is the word judicial or judge, right? Which is going to be on a warrant that will be called a search warrant that will be issued by a court of law. The other warrant merely is an immigration form. And what does that mean? It means the ICE officer merely needs only their supervisor to sign off. That does not go before a judge, right? So if the warrant says judge or magistrate judge with a signature on it, then we're talking about a judicial warrant. If it doesn't, and it's an immigration form, that's an ICE warrant, and that does not carry the same weight. Any other questions?
Feel free for those that are in the audience to raise your hand, and or if you feel comfortable coming off mute to ask your question, you can do so at this moment in regards to this presentation that you just seen. I have another one. Oh, there you go. There's a question that just came in the chat from Henry Goldschmidt. It's, can you say a little bit more about making a safety plan?
Sure, absolutely. So I know you heard from many of the students from Taylor and Jaime and Natalie and Lena today about all this important information, right? But what we didn't discuss is what actually that important information is. So perhaps this is a good time to outline it. So this goes into the idea of having a difficult conversation, right? Which is something that no one likes to do. And I can't imagine having the difficult conversation about what it might be like if ICE comes, right? But the information that a friend or family member, a trusted person needs to know could be really helpful here in case the really bad thing does happen, right? So what is that? Your full legal name, right? Not your nickname, but what actually is your full legal name, your date of birth, your country of birth, and your country of citizenship. And also something called your A number. A in our immigration laws, which are very antiquated, which means old and use language that is completely not correct. A stands for alien, which hopefully will be changing to be called something else. But the A number is going to be an 8 or 9-digit number. It's like your identification number for immigration. So if you have one of those because you have had previous contact with immigration or filed a type of application, it would be a really good idea to make sure that your trusted friend or family member has that number too. It's going to be helpful in case something happens. If you have a lawyer, write the name, the email, the phone number of that lawyer. That would be a great thing to let that friend or family member know that. And also where any important documents are, right? The documents from your home country, birth certificate, passport, right? Any kind of immigration documents, marriage certificate, your kids' birth certificates, right? If all of that is in a safe location, to make sure that your trusted friend or family member knows where those documents are, so that in case they need to access them, they can. Yeah, students, did I leave anything out? Anything else you want to add?
Okay, if there are
Sorry to jump in, Hanedi, but we have another question in the chat. Lena in the chat has just put in a question. Wanted to flag that for you guys.
Great. Thank you. I didn't see that. I can read it out to you and Professor Claire and students if you want to answer. Elena is saying that I want to make sure that there isn't too much private information in here. Professor Claire, would you like to take a look at the question?
Sure, let me just take a look at it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't want to, and just as a disclaimer to everyone that's listening in, we try to not we would encourage you not to put any private information. I'm sorry, Lena, I just wanted to make sure that we can do it right. So.
Okay, super. And Lena, thank you. I appreciate you saying Lena from the chat as opposed to student Lena. I'm sorry, we have lots of Lenas, which is a lovely name. Right. And Lena, your question about as a conventional refugee, my follow-up question, Lena from the chat, Lena, is does that mean you were resettled to the United States as a refugee? Is that what that means? Okay. Super. Does that mean you were granted asylum in the United States, or does that mean you went through a process overseas and then came to the United States? Okay, I think what Lena's saying is that she was granted all in the United States. Okay, super. And okay, I think, Lena, in terms of your question, I'm not entirely sure if you went to the immigration court system would keep your information private from your home country. Our state and federal court systems, meaning our other courts for reasons other than immigration, let's say in the United States, will keep some information private and some not. It really just depends on what kind of case it is. So I think in terms of answering your question, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that, right, in sort of this group setting. But I'm happy to give resources for attorneys if you wouldn't mind just sort of hanging out. I'll try to do that perhaps while the next group starts their presentation or while we answer more questions. So Lena from the chat, hang on one second, and I'll try to get your some more resources. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If there aren't any other questions, I think we should move on to the next presentation, if that makes sense.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Students, thank you so much. And if the next group could come up, and Elisa, please feel free to share your screen and start us off.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to everyone who joined us today. My name is Elisa Garifulina, and I'm a law student at New York Law School. My group and I will talk about immigration services providers today. Our goal for this presentation is to cover 4 topics. So first of all, I will explain to you who immigration services providers are and what they can and cannot do for you. Then Edwin will discuss common immigration scams, and Young will discuss various consequences of those scams. And lastly, Aubrey will end the presentation by outlining your rights when dealing with immigration services providers. So this is the question: who can help me with immigration? Getting help from someone who is not qualified to give you legal advice, like an notarial, can be worse than not getting any help at all. So sometimes even advice from a friend who means well can hurt your immigration status in the United States. So if you need advice or help, get it for someone who is authorized by the US government to help you. Lots of people, businesses, and organizations offer immigration services. But the question is, who is legally able to do so and who is not? So these 3 groups of people, organizations are allowed to help you with immigration matters. But each group is different in what kind of help it is allowed to offer. So I would like to discuss with you today each group separately and what they can or cannot do for you. So what can a lawyer or an attorney do for you? Lawyers can give you legal advice and represent you before immigration agencies. So an example of that would be when a lawyer gives you legal advice about forms and legal documents for your immigration case, or when a lawyer tells you which forms are needed for your case and fills those forms out for you, or when a lawyer tells you for which immigration category should apply and files those forms on your behalf. Lawyers practicing immigration law must be licensed in a US state or territory. Because immigration law in the United States is federal, the immigration lawyer can assist people with immigration issues in different states than the one in which they are licensed. But their legal services out of state must be solely focused on immigration law. So before you start working with a lawyer, you should be sure to check that the lawyer of your choice is licensed and is in good standing. That means that they're authorized to practice law and are not in trouble for breaking the rules for lawyers. So you can check if a lawyer is licensed by visiting the American Bar Association website on the slide. And Young, I think, will put the link in the chat. American Bar Association website has a list of all of the states and territories. And when you go on the website, you should click on the state where a lawyer is practicing. And then the website will redirect you to that state's agency website where you can find out whether your lawyer is licensed or not. So the second group of people who can give you, who can help you with immigration issues is Department of Justice Accredited Representatives. So what can they do for you? This recognition and accreditation are the Department of Justice's certification of charitable immigration agencies and staff. And basically, it allows non-attorney staff to practice immigration law before the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, and the immigration courts. So accredited representatives are not lawyers, but they are authorized by the United States government to give you legal immigration advice. They can also represent you before immigration agencies. These representatives must be accredited themselves, and at the same time, they must work for an accredited nonprofit organization that is officially organized, recognized by the US government. The names of both the accredited representatives and these recognized organizations are on a list kept by the Board of Immigration at the Department of Justice. So if you're working with an accredited representative, you should check if that provider, if that representative is actually accredited. So in order to do that, you should visit this link on the Department of Justice website, and Young will post that link in a chat right now. So now we get to this part of immigration services providers. So lots of other people who are not lawyers or who are not accredited representatives fall under the umbrella of immigration services providers. So who they are, what do they do? Who is an immigration services provider? As you can see on the slide, an immigration services provider is a person who assists people with immigration law matters. People or businesses might call themselves travel agencies or immigration consultants or notarios, but this does not mean that they are actually licensed to provide legal advice on your immigration case. So immigration services providers are not attorneys, they are not supervised by attorneys, and they are not accredited, and thus they cannot provide legal advice for you. So what can they do for you then? So an immigration services provider can give you materials such as law books or forms, so you can prepare legal documents on your own. They can also give you a list of forms and legal documents. They can type or fill out forms for you, but only if you tell that person what to write. They can also file forms in court for you, but only if you tell that person what to file. They can also serve legal papers on other parties. An immigration services provider cannot give you any legal advice. For example, they cannot tell you for what kind of immigration categories, such as asylum or labor certification, you should apply. They cannot fill out forms for you if you do not tell the provider what to write. They cannot promise to get you a green card, work visa, or other benefit for ineligible immigrants. They cannot tell you that they know someone on the inside or have connections with the USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, or INS, to expedite your application. Additionally, they cannot use terms in their advertisements implying that they're an attorney.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Edwin Gill. I'm in my last year of law school, and I'm here to talk about some common immigration scams. I know we kind of threw a lot of information at you so far, and I'm here to throw some more at you guys. So what I'm going to cover today is going to be common scams, but also red flags to look out for. So you know that if you see something and you see one of these red flags, chances are it's probably not a good idea to go through with it. So the basic theme I wanna, if you remember anything, is if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So did you get a suspicious email or a call? Did you get an offer, a guarantee that they can get you a green card in a few months? These, I can tell you, are not true. And if you do go with someone that says that they can do this for you, you probably will regret it in the future. So I'm here to show you some red flags so you guys at least have some idea that what not to do, basically, in this, unless if you could. So if it sounds too good to be true, if someone says that, oh, I have a connection with someone, I can get you a green card in no time. If you pay me $1,000, I can make sure you get papers in a few months. If it sounds too good to be true, again, I'm going to repeat this a lot. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, and it's probably going to cost you a lot of money, and to cost even more money when you have to go back and fix it, if it's even able to, if you can even fix it. Because a lot of these scams are just looking to get your money and are taking advantage of people who don't understand the U.S. immigration system, which is complex. It's even we're students and we're learning something like new every day about this immigration system. So please, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Another scam that people like to do is send you an email. So if you get an email saying from the U.S. government asking for some information or payments, and it doesn't come from a .gov at the end, it isn't a real email. Emails from the federal government will always come at the end .gov. If you get an email and you're not sure if it's real, check where it came from. If it doesn't end with a .gov, it isn't real. Don't pay it any mind, delete it, forget about it. Also, if you get a call or an email asking for strange payments, if they're asking you, please pay through PayPal or a gift card or Western Union, do not send them money. Later on, right now, USCIS, so the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, is what all immigrants are going to have to deal with when you go through the U.S. immigration process. Anything you file, anything you do with an attorney, chances are you're going to go through with USCIS. And here are a few things to know that when you're dealing with them. USCIS will never ask for personal information or payment over a phone. So if you get a phone call and they're asking, oh, we're from USCIS, we just need some more information from you, then don't give them anything, hang up. If you have an attorney, they will reach out to the attorney. If they need anything, they'll probably send you a letter in the mail. They're not going to call you at your personal cell phone. They're not going to email you asking for money. That is something the U.S. government doesn't do. USCIS will never ask you to transfer money to an individual or ask you to pay fees to a person by on the phone or email. Again, the US government does not ask for money through emails or on a phone call. If you get an email saying, oh, your application is missing a fee, please send a payment through credit or anything like that. It's not true. If you forget to pay a fee, they'll just send the application right back to you or your attorney, and then you just include it, you can send it again. But they do not call you asking for fees. Also, another thing to look out for is USCIS will never ask you to pay to download immigration forms. Immigration forms are free to download on their website. You even after this presentation, you can go to their website, you can take a look at the forms for yourself. These are the official forms that every attorney, every immigration services provider will have to use, and they're free of charge. Now, you might have to pay for someone to complete the applications for you. That's different, but you never are going to have to pay to get access to those application forms. USCIS will never call you about failing to pay a fee. As I said before, if you do forget to pay a fee or a biometrics fee, for instance, they'll just send it right back to you or the attorney. They're not going to call you and be like, oh, you forgot to pay this, please pay over the phone or anything like that. And last, if you do encounter ICE agents or so-called ICE agents, they will never let you avoid arrest in exchange for money. If they're there and they want to arrest you, no amount of money is going to tell them, make them go away. So if they're saying, we're going to arrest you and we're going to deport you unless you pay us this, don't do it. It's fraudulent, and do not give money to any so-called ICE agents that ask for money. All right, and now that you know some red flags to look out for, these common immigration scams, and these are not the only ones. There are so many out there, but just knowing those red flags will tell you that these following scams are scams. They're not real. They're not something you should put your time and money in. For instance, emails from the USCIS New Delhi field office, for instance. There's been reports of people receiving an email from this field office asking for money or saying that they've been approved for a visa. Again, if it doesn't end with a .gov, it's not a real email. It's not from the federal government. It's just from someone that is trying to either take your money, your personal information, or has nothing good for you in store. So please ignore that email. There's also a link that you could probably send. I'll send it in the group chat later on, that if you do encounter one of these emails, please just forward it to them and they can take care of that. Also, payments requested by phone or email. Again, the federal government will not ask for money over the phone or through an email. If they have an issue with your application or whatever else that you're dealing with, they'll send you a mail or they'll talk to the attorney that is representing you. They're not going to reach out to you directly for money. Phone calls from the Department of Homeland Security. Again, people who call claiming they're from the government asking for money is always a red flag. Please hang up. Don't bother with that. Winning the visa lottery. So a lot of, unfortunately, people have received these emails saying that they've been approved for a diversity visa lottery. So what that means is that the visa lottery is run by the US State Department, but it's only from applicants from certain countries. So unfortunately, people don't really understand this and believe that they can apply for this and then they'll win a green card. In reality, is only a certain number of applicants from certain countries are qualify for this visa. So if you do receive some type of notification saying that you won a diversity visa lottery, if you never apply for that, you're not going to receive any kind of notification. If you've been approved for that, they'll speak to an attorney, whoever is representing you, or they will receive a letter in the mail from the United States government. You're not going to receive a phone call or an email about that. And the next one, paying for immigration forms. Again, if someone's telling you you have to pay to get these forms, that is not true. You do have to pay if you want someone to help you complete the forms, but to get the forms themselves, no, they're free to download. You're able to go, once you're done with this presentation, you can go online and you can get them yourselves. You can print like 100 copies if you want. They're all there for free. Paying someone for their connections. So unfortunately, there's no way to really cut the line. The US immigration system is complex. There's a long line of people who are waiting for visas to get into the country or to get legal status. And unfortunately, there's no way around to pay someone to just go in front of the line. If someone says, oh, I know somebody in the government, oh, I know someone from UMC Immigration, that's not true. There's no legal way for people to pay to cut the line and get a green card within months. There's also the instances with deportation threats. Again, ICE will not ask you for money to avoid deportation. And strange payment methods. Again, if someone's asking you to pay with a gift card, someone's asking you to pay with a Western Union, do not send them money. So these are, I'm gonna keep drilling. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So now that you know a few of those red flags and a few of those scams, what can you do so you don't fall victim to these scams? You can keep original documents. So USCIS will accept copies of original documents. You don't have to send your original birth certificate. You don't have to send your original passport to the US government. A photocopy of those documents is sufficient to send with your application. Do not sign any immigration forms or documents that contain false information. I know we've said this before in the presentation, but again, it's very important that you do not sign any documents that you know has false information. That can have very negative consequences for you down the line. Do not give money or personal information to people over the phone. If they're really trying to get in contact with you, they'll send you letters in the mail, they'll talk to you, and whoever's representing you, whichever attorney is representing you. But if someone's reaching out to you and they're saying they're from the government, do not give them their information. Keep copies of all documents regarding your immigration status. So once you do have someone representing you, you do have a right to all the documents that the US government sends to them. They're yours. You have every right to ask for those copies. And last but not least, hire a licensed immigration attorney, not a notary or an immigration consultant.
Hi, I'm Yang Gao. I'm a second-year law student at New York Law School. I want to talk about why we should try to avoid being scammed. Immigration scammers can really do a lot of harm to you. Of course, the first harm is financial loss. You paid the money and you didn't get the service you want. Most scammers would ask you to pay a significant amount of money. Sometimes they would tell you, they would give you guarantee that they can help you get what you want. The truth is, most often they would not provide the proper immigration service for you. They may file a fraudulent application on your behalf or just run away with your money. The second harm is imminent harm. For example, there is a common scam called 10 years visa. Scammers may tell you once you live in the US for 10 years, you can get green card. The truth is this immigration relief is called cancellation of removal. To be eligible for that, you need to meet some other requirements. One of the requirements is you need to bring up the application while you are in the immigration court proceeding. And it's not easy to meet those other requirements. However, the scammers, to start the so-called 10-year visa case, may file a fraudulent asylum case on your behalf to get you in these immigration court proceedings. When you are in the immigration court, the immigration judge is likely to find your case is not eligible for this kind of relief. Then you will get removal order and face deportation. Not only that, it can also cause some future harms. For example, the scammers might tell you he can help you get work permit. The scammers might file a fraudulent green card application on your behalf. While the green card application is pending, USCIS, they will issue you a temporary work permit. However, when the USCIS started to review your case, they will find out the application is fraudulent and they will deny your green card application, and together they will revoke the work permit they issued to you. The fraudulent application would create a record for you in USCIS. This record with wrong information may be considered as fraud, and the fraud will bar you from getting any immigration relief, even when you become eligible for some other form of immigration relief in the future. So as you can see, the harms of being scammed is really huge and lasting. All immigrants should pay more attention when we are trying to seek some legal help for immigration case.
Hi, my name is Aubrey Thompson, and I am a 3L law student. I graduate in May. So tonight we've learned who an immigration service provider is. We've learned some of the common scams and some red flags to look out for, and we've also gone over what some possible consequences are. So now, the last thing tonight that we're going to go over are what are your rights when dealing with an immigration service provider. So to start off with, you can ask them for an explanation of what the forms are. You can ask this about forms that you're signing, forms that you're filling out, or forms that are being filed on your behalf. You can also ask for an explanation of what possible consequences any forms or actions could have. As was discussed earlier, you cannot make stuff up or write documents pretending to be someone else. This can have a very detrimental impact on your immigration into the US. It can also cause many consequences like Young went over just a minute ago. You can also ask your immigration service provider questions. You can ask them any question, and you should feel free to be able to do that. You shouldn't feel pressure to remain silent. And as was mentioned also earlier, when you are working with an attorney, you can look up their credentials to make sure they are authorized to be working as an attorney in the state that you are in. And you can also go get a second opinion. Your provider might try to pressure you to stay with them or say it has to be done right now, but you always have the option to go get a second opinion. You can even go get a third opinion if you want. That is up to you. And in some cases, it is encouraged because one person might not be as well versed in it, and so it might be the best to go get a second opinion. So here are some tips for when you're dealing with an immigration service provider. You have the right, and you should always keep the originals of your documents and then give attorneys and the immigration services, including the courts, the copies of these documents, including your birth certificate, any passports, or even just forms that you filled out. You're entitled to have any information you give an immigration service provider for that information to be kept confidential, meaning they can't go and just share it with anybody they see down the street. They have to keep it between you and them, and that is a right that you are entitled to. You also have a right to have a copy of any document, form, or application that's being filed on your behalf. And you also have a right to keep that copy with you. And you have a right to ask for a receipt for anything or any service that you are paying for, so that you can keep that in your records to show that you did pay for this, and that an immigration service provider cannot come to you later saying that you did not pay completely. Another good rule of thumb is you should not sign any blank or incomplete forms, because you do not know what the immigration service provider or what a person who is trying to scam you is going to put in the form after you've signed it. And these are just some more tips. You should only go to providers that actually have a physical location. However, because of COVID-19, some services some service providers or attorneys, they might not be meeting their clients at their office. They might be meeting them downstairs outside of their office or across the street or in a park. But this doesn't mean they do not have a physical location. So if a service provider or someone who is trying to scam you is saying to come meet them, say in the middle of the night or at some crazy place that just, it doesn't sound right, and you have a gut feeling that it's not right, you might not should go, and you might should check and just check their credentials and make sure they actually are authorized to be giving you this advice before you go. You also have the right to ask for a written agreement that describes what services are being provided and for that agreement to be signed by the provider. You should never sign any papers, immigration forms, contracts that you do not fully understand. If English is not your first language, you have a right to get these documents translated into a language you can understand so that you can know exactly what you're signing. And again, just to reiterate this, you do not have to pay for government application forms. You can download them for free at the USCIS.gov/forms website. However, there may be a filing fee, and a service provider may charge a fee to fill out these applications on your behalf, but you do not have to pay to download these forms. These are just some more links to help you better educate yourself about immigration service fraud and what to do if you are a victim of it. And then these are just some more helpful links that are in the chat now. And that is the end of our presentation. If anybody has any questions about our presentation or any other questions that have come up, please feel free to raise your hand or post it in the chat.
Thank you all so much. That was very informative and very helpful. Does anyone have any questions to get us started?
I do.
Go for it.
Thank you guys for your presentation. It was very important, and it was a lot of information, but it was also very helpful. Something that occurred to me while this was happening: if someone was a victim of immigration fraud because of the immigration services provider that they went to, how do you recommend they proceed? What should they do? I mean, they're probably going to be in shambles and crying and maybe broke. How do you recommend they proceed?
Students, anyone want to start? Do you want me to? You let me know what you think. No takers? Nobody? Okay. I'll go and then you jump in if I forget anything. How about that? So this is something that the students and I have seen, sadly, pretty regularly. We provide legal immigration screenings on a monthly basis, oftentimes twice a month. And oftentimes what we'll see is a student come to us because they think their parents are being victimized by a fraudulent services provider. Sometimes that's an attorney who's not doing their job properly. Sometimes that's a plain old scammer, right? Someone who's a quote unquote immigration consultant, someone who's not licensed and not a DOJ accredited representative, and someone who's just, behaving like a lawyer but is not licensed as an attorney. So it's tough, absolutely. And I think people come with all kinds of emotions. It's just what I've seen in my own limited experience. But as the students talked about, I think from Aubrey and sort of the last person to present, the idea of getting a second opinion is a really good first place to start, right? So if let's say your loved one, you think there might be an issue, right? These red flags are going off. This sounds too good to be true. Encourage them to get a second opinion. We have some resources in terms of nonprofit services providers, but also other private attorneys. Most folks will do a consultation for low cost or free sometimes, depending on people's, fee agreements. But that would be a great place to start, right? Get a second opinion to see if the services provider you're going to is actually helping you with something that is possible within the law. Sometimes for a lot of folks we see there isn't a way for folks to get their papers right now. Our immigration law is really limited, is extremely problematic, right? And folks sometimes don't fit into the very narrow boxes that it defines for immigration categories. But what we see sometimes is even if there isn't a legal way for folks to get their papers, a scam artist will say, hey, just pay me this amount of money and we can find a path, right? And so talking and getting a second opinion sometimes helps with that. After the second opinion, then that person has a choice, what they want to do. Do they want to continue with that person who is helping them down a path that doesn't seem like a good idea? Do they want to switch to another lawyer? I think you brought up the important point, and I know Yang did too, of and Edwin as well, everyone, of that you might lose money, right, on this. And that is really tough and very real. And our legal system does not have a good mechanism for you to recap your money. Quite frankly, that system doesn't exist. You can file a complaint on various different levels if the person's a lawyer with different bar associations. Those are our sort of legal licensing mechanisms as attorneys, depending on the state we're licensed in, as well as the different immigration agencies, right? They have their own complaint mechanisms. But this doesn't mean that the problems that were raised go away, like Edwin and Young talked about, right? Those problems can still very well be there. Things like fraud that could stay in your immigration record forever. So important to talk to someone, important to talk about, all the issues that came up. And I think always to remember, if it sounds too good to be true, it just might be.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. At this point, I think we want to invite, if anyone's in the audience that does have a question, please feel free to come off of mute and ask the question or post it in the chat. We'll read it out and address it. In the meantime, I do have another question that I was thinking about, and this is something that I think that has hit the Muslim community fairly hard. And I just wanted to maybe Professor Claire,
Sure.
you can talk about and address this question is, what major changes to immigration law have come about because of COVID? Has there been anything drastic or noteworthy? We've seen some people not being able to have their green card lotteries fulfilled because of the law change and the president change, which is a good thing. So I'm wondering, like, how have there been any major changes to immigration law because of COVID?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. I think we need to be mindful that there were over 400 changes to immigration law under the past administration. A lot of those incredibly significant, but really touching all aspects of our immigration system. So I can't think of a population of folks in a specific immigration category that wasn't impacted by one of those, at least one of those 400 changes. So we have all that. Our current administration hasn't just flushed them all away, right? A lot of those are still there. Some very notable and extremely problematic ones, meaning like the Muslim ban, for example, are gone, meaning they're rescinded, but there's still problems, and those problems are due, quite frankly, to COVID and the different travel restrictions that are still in place. So I think maybe let's talk about those to fully answer your question. So we do have the idea that everything is slower. Everything was already super slow in our immigration system, and now it's even slower, right? We have the idea that embassies and consulates abroad, meaning the US embassies and consulates, are slowly starting to reopen, but oftentimes it's just for quote unquote emergencies. And their definition of what is an emergency is really not someone's immigration application, sadly. So getting an appointment, right, to go to the embassy is still incredibly problematic. The Canadian-US border, like Natalie talked to you about, that's still closed for, tourism. Tourism includes visiting your relatives, right? And that's been closed for over a year. The same with the southern border, which might impact folks on this presentation as well. And then we have different sort of bans put in place by the Trump administration, which are sort of loosely tied to public health, which are still in place. And that is for folks from specific countries have to effectively be outside of their country for 14 days before entering the United States. And those countries are like China, Iran, the UK, Europe, the Schengen zone of Europe, Brazil, South Africa, what am I forgetting? UK, Ireland, right? So we have sort of a robust list of countries, and this is supposedly due to COVID, right? Where folks would have to go to another country, like for example, Mexico for 2 weeks before being able to enter the United States. So just sort of an added layer of hardship on top of that. So those, I think, were the main ones that I had. So for instance, if someone has a family member whose immigration application was perhaps impacted by the Muslim ban, for example, and now, okay, that's gone, super. Why can't my family member show up here, right? And it's that visa probably needs to be reissued. To get that visa reissued means you got to go to the consulate or embassy abroad. Getting that appointment is tough. Absolutely, it's tough under normal circumstances. But when we put COVID and reduced capacity and all of that, it makes it a long wait time to get that appointment. And then if that person is in one of those countries that I listed, then to actually get on a plane and come here, it's just layer upon layer of stuff. So yeah, I think for the Muslim community and for other communities, absolutely, sure, there's still lots of those 400 changes plus COVID that are still definitely impacting immigrant families.
Thank you. At this point, if there aren't any other questions, I think, Professor Claire, is there anything else that you would like to add, or the students, any of the presenters today, if there's any other information that you think you would like to add, please feel free to take this moment to do so.
Sure, I would just like to tell the students, great job. I think you all conveyed a lot of information in a short period of time very well. And I know that this is recorded, which I'm thankful for, so that it can be on the Interfaith Center's website and also distributed to us at New York Law School, so that folks who perhaps, couldn't come to our live Zoom meeting might be able to still benefit from this information, which I think is incredibly useful. So thank you to Henry and Hennedy for making that happen.
No problem. Thank you. I just want to take a moment and thank everyone for attending tonight. I would like to thank you especially for the students, for all your energy and time that you put in here. Congratulations to the ones that are graduating soon. You've made it this far. I can't wait to see you succeed a lot more. And to all the students that are coming up on that, we wish you the best of luck. Thank you, Professor Claire Thomas, for your leadership throughout this program and putting this all together. Also, many thanks to our co-sponsors, who are many. And like Claire had mentioned, a copy of this recording will be made available via our social media sites very soon. We'll be able to send it out to everyone that is interested in watching. And also the students took the liberty of putting together a resource guide for all those that are in attendance today. And what we'll do is we'll send the follow-up email with the link to this video and a copy of that resource guide. Thank you again very much for your presentation tonight and your efforts. And I wish you all a good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much.